It is the summer of 1187. The fate of Jerusalem, holy to Muslims and Christians alike, hangs in the balance. At the head of a vast Muslim army rides Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known to history as Saladin. He is Sultan of both Egypt and Syria, the first man of his time to unite these lands under one banner. Under his command, an allied force of Syrian and Egyptian warriors has just routed the Crusader army at the Battle of Hattin. In the sweltering desert heat, Saladin's engineers even poured water onto the ground and set dry brush ablaze to suffocate their enemies. The Crusader host was shattered, King Gu of Jerusalem captured, and the Crusaders' sacred true cross seized as a trophy. The road to Jerusalem lies open at last. But before the glory of conquest, Saladin was a young prince named Yusuf. Born around 1137 in the city of Tikrit in Mesopotamia, he was a member of a prominent Kurdish family of warriors loyal to Nur al-Din, the ruler of Syria. His childhood was spent in the vibrant courts and schools of Baalbek and Damascus, a world of caravan bazaars, mosque courtyards, and scribes' quills. At his birth in Tikrit, Yusuf ibn Ayyub entered a powerful clan. His father, Najm al-Din Ayyub, and his uncle Shirkuh were seasoned commanders under the Turkish warlord Imad al-Din Zengi. Within months, Najm al-Din moved the family north to Aleppo to serve Zengi, and young Yusuf's early years unfolded among the citadels of Baalbek and Damascus. Though born to a martial lineage, the boy was remembered as modest and devout, learning the Quran and Islamic law in the madrasas of Damascus. Around 1163, the Syrian prince Nur al-Din sent General Shirkuh on a campaign to seize Egypt from the Fatimid Caliphate. Chroniclers record that Shirkuh brought the young Yusuf along as his page. Thus, Saladin saw his first battles as a teenager and beheld the people of Egypt. This campaign would soon change his life. In early 1169, General Shirkuh died suddenly in Egypt, and Nur al-Din elevated Saladin to command. At just 31 years old, Saladin was named vizier of the Fatimid Caliphate. When the Fatimid Caliph died later that year without an heir, Saladin moved decisively. He abolished the Shia Fatimid regime and reinstated Sunni Islam as the state religion. As governor of Egypt, he used Cairo's resources and army as a base of power in the Near East. In Egypt, Saladin proved himself a shrewd administrator. He cemented alliances by marrying Ismat al-Din, the widow of Nur al-Din and daughter of Damascus's former emir. He commissioned surveys of the Nile lands and required his officials to master the Arabic language and local customs. Despite his authority, Saladin remained personally humble. He dressed simply, gave generously to the poor, and treated his subordinates with kindness. In 1174, Nur al-Din died, leaving Saladin as the senior leader in the Muslim world. He marched north with a formidable army and captured Damascus without resistance. By marrying Ismat and claiming Nur al-Din's legacy, Saladin announced himself ruler of all Syria. Over the next dozen years, he absorbed Aleppo, Mosul, and even Yemen into his realm. By 1186, he had achieved his goal. From Egypt to Mesopotamia, he ruled a united Muslim empire, joined at last in purpose. Throughout these years, Saladin's reputation for virtue grew along with his power. Both Muslim historians and some Christian observers emphasize his piety, generosity, and justice. But William of Tyre, a Christian chronicler, wrote that Saladin possessed three knightly virtues: wisdom in council, courage in battle, and generosity beyond measure. Saladin built madrasas and mosques and took care of the poor, just as he led men in war. The conflict with the Crusader states came to a head in 1187. That summer, King Guy of Jerusalem and his nobles marched north to relieve the fortress of Tiberias. Saladin met them on the barren plains near the twin volcanic peaks, called the Horns of Hattin. In the blazing 47 DGC heat, Saladin's army held the water and drew the Franks into a trap. His archers poured arrows into the enemy, and his men even set fire to the parched earth and brush, choking the Crusaders with smoke. On July 4, 1187, the Crusader host finally broke. Surrounded and exhausted, their great army was destroyed. King Guy and thousands of knights were taken prisoner, and Saladin's troops claimed the greatest prize, the True Cross, the Franks' holiest relic. The battlefield was Saladin's triumph. In the weeks that followed Hattin, Nearly every Frankish fortress in the Kingdom of Jerusalem surrendered without prolonged siege. Only the coastal fortress of Tyre held out. Now the prize remained, Jerusalem itself. On September 20, Saladin's armies encircled Jerusalem. Patriarch Heraclius and Balian of Ibelin, leading a ragged defense, prepared for the worst. Many Christians feared the city would be sacked in revenge for 1099. But Saladin offered a different judgment. He proposed peace. If the city's inhabitants paid a modest ransom, they would be allowed to go free. Otherwise, they would lose their lives. Balian and the city's leaders, desperate to save Jerusalem, agreed to these terms. On October 2, 1187, Jerusalem surrendered peacefully, and Saladin entered the city in triumph, tempered by mercy. True to his word, Saladin ensured the city's population was treated well. Those who could not pay the ransom, the elderly, the sick, the poor, were freed outright by his order. Others were ransomed at humble rates. He forbade his soldiers from looting or bloodshed. This astonishing clemency, rare in medieval warfare, became part of Saladin's legend. Even Jerusalem's holy sites were spared. Saladin initially closed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to consider its fate, but after 3 days he reopened it, saying he would not deter Christian pilgrims. He allowed Eastern Orthodox and Coptic Christians to remain in the city and continue their worship. Thus, Jerusalem was won with remarkably little bloodshed, its sanctuaries left intact. News of Jerusalem's fall sent shockwaves through Europe. In 1189, Pope Gregory VIII proclaimed the Third Crusade. 3 great monarchs took up the cross: Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa of Germany, King Philip II of France, and King Richard I Lionheart of England. Frederick led his armies across Asia Minor, but in June 1190 he tragically drowned in a river. His host disbanded, leaving the crusade to the Western kings. Meanwhile, Philip and Richard joined forces in the spring of 1191 and sailed to the Holy Land. By July 1191, the Crusaders had captured Acre after a brutal siege. Richard even slaughtered thousands of Muslim prisoners when the surrender terms were disputed. Still, Saladin endured. He sent fresh troops to retake Acre's defenses and managed to hold the coast. Neither side could deal a crushing blow. Richard went on to defeat Saladin at Arsuf in September 1191, but could not reach Jerusalem. His army was menaced by disease and lack of supplies. By 1192, both leaders were exhausted. Under pressure, they negotiated. The resulting Treaty of Jaffa, September 1192, left Jerusalem in Muslim hands but guaranteed its pilgrims safe passage. A narrow strip of coastal territory remained under Crusader control. It was a compromise. King Richard returned home, Saladin returned to Damascus. Both had fought hard, but neither had truly been defeated. Thus ended the Third Crusade. Both sides claimed honor. Richard had repelled Saladin, and Saladin had held Jerusalem. In fact, Saladin's achievement was to outlast and outmaneuver Europe's finest knights. As Britannica notes, Saladin's greatest feat was simply keeping so many disunited Crusader contingents at bay for so long. By early 1193, Saladin's life was spent. Decades of war had weakened him. In March 1193, he died peacefully in Damascus at the age of 55. He had lived as he had ruled, with humility and charity. Historians record that Saladin had given so much of his wealth to help others that his treasury was nearly empty at his death. The empire Saladin built did not long survive him. Within years, his brothers and sons were fighting over Syria and Egypt. By the mid-13th century, the Ayyubid dynasty he founded would yield to the Mamelukes. Yet Saladin's name only grew. In the Muslim world, Saladin is revered as a hero who reclaimed Jerusalem and defended Islam. In the West, he is remembered as a paragon of chivalry, the noble Uncle Saladin of Crusader tales. Both Muslim and Christian historians note that he was celebrated for his military skill and for his generosity and honor. Even centuries later, people invoke Saladin as the ideal of a just and compassionate ruler. Saladin's life was one of great contrasts, warrior and saint, emperor and humble servant. In the end, even those who fought him called him generous and virtuous. From the streets of Tikrit to the battlefields of the Levant, he strove to uphold courage and mercy in equal measure. This was Saladin, the chivalrous sultan.